Well, it appears I have struck a nerve. My last video where I spoke about how big tech censoring conservatives was an overblown victim mentality was not well received, so I think it's important I clear some things up. First of all, I do not want any confusion. I am not pro-censorship. Not even slightly. I've had videos deleted from YouTube and I've been banned from Twitter. All I'm saying is that the claims of big tech censoring conservatives has been blown way out of proportion to near conspiratorial levels. So anyone claiming I am pro-censorship is a liar spreading fake news. Secondly, to the people claiming I am now suddenly a liberal or I'm no longer a conservative, do you people hear yourself? Since when is believing in big tech censoring conservatives a fundamental core belief of conservatism? I'm pro-life, pro-Trump, pro-gun, pro-free speech, and anti-political correctness. But I suppose all of that now goes out the window because I disagree with one common conservative talking point? I've never stuck to party lines, and you can be mad all day long that you can't fit me in your box. These ridiculous labels are becoming more and more like mental prisons, and I am not going to just say what everyone wants to hear just because a lot of conservatives believe one thing. We want to win the culture war, but we cannot expect to do that if we refuse to look inward and challenge our way of thinking. Claiming I am no longer a conservative because I disagree with one non-foundational conservative talking point is the exact same approach the liberal shills take. Stop being a political Puritan and think for yourself. Lastly, I do want to address the confusion around PragerU and Steven Crowder from my last video. I actually do want to apologize if anyone got the wrong impression. I by no means consider PragerU or Steven Crowder even remotely alt-right. I'm willing to admit that I didn't make that clear enough in my video, and for that, I'm sorry. I don't agree with Steven Crowder and PragerU when it comes to their claims of conservative censorship, but I by no means consider them alt-right, and they do a lot of good for the conservative movement. Now, as far as the negative feedback, I really didn't receive any good rebuttals. Mostly anecdotal evidence and people just getting mad. However, I did see a reoccurring argument constantly come up. Project Veritas. I'm familiar with this organization, but for those of you who aren't, Project Veritas is a right-wing activist group famous for going undercover and secretly recording left-wing higher-ups engaging in negative behavior. Project Veritas recently did a big expose piece on Google claiming to prove that Google is indeed censoring conservatives. And a lot of people pointed out that I didn't mention Project Veritas in my last video. So does Project Veritas really prove conservative censorship? Or is it simply out of context clips being forced into a narrative? We are about to find out as we examine Project Veritas' claims of conservative censorship by big tech. It's not unreasonable for conservatives to be skeptical of big tech. In fact, it makes sense. These corporations are primarily located in Silicon Valley, a place notorious for a disproportionate saturation of left-wing and liberal ideology. Zach Graves, the head of policy at the famously right-wing Lincoln Network, acknowledges this, but encourages conservatives to actually look into the technological evidence provided before actually publicly advertising their perceived persecution. The little data the conservatives use to back up their claims of censorship then should actually be analyzed in depth, preferably with the help of conservatives who understand technological algorithms before accusations are taken too seriously. The recent investigation by Project Veritas, which allegedly found proof that Google is actively trying to censor conservatives, appears to be the most common piece of evidence invoked when the discussion about big tech censorship arises. But how trustworthy is Project Veritas? Well, that's for you to decide. Project Veritas was founded in 2010 by James O'Keefe, and since then the company has earned millions of dollars in donations. James O'Keefe is certainly no stranger to the headlines. In 2009, this self-proclaimed muckraker leaked videos suggesting that Acorn employees were aiding criminal activity, such as prostitution. When he leaked these videos, both public and private funding automatically halted for Acorn, but when an investigation finally occurred, Acorn employees were acquitted and the footage was confirmed to be fake. As a result of this scandal, Acorn nearly went bankrupt and had to close down or rename many of their locations. O'Keefe pled guilty to allegations of invasion of privacy, issued a public apology, and paid $100,000 in settlements. In 2010, James O'Keefe illegally tapped into former Senator Mary Landry's phone, for which he served 3 years probation and 100 hours of community service. Just 4 years later, O'Keefe selectively edited a private conversation he had with Hollywood film director Josh Fox, framing him for accepting money for an anti-fracking movie from Middle Eastern oil interests. Luckily for Fox, he also recorded his entire conversation with O'Keefe, which in their entirety and proper context absolved him of his alleged crimes. For O'Keefe, these are just a few in a long line of whistleblowing attempts which failed and proved his dishonesty. Scott Baker, a journalist for The Blaze, further called into question the legitimacy of tactics that O'Keefe uses in editing his clips, writing. But even if you are of the opinion, as I am, that undercover reporting is acceptable and ethical in very defined situations, it is another thing to approve of editing tactics that seem designed to intentionally lie or mislead about the material being presented. So does this within itself discredit Project Veritas's allegations involving big tech censorship? Of course not, but it most definitely should make us more wary about its findings. So let's get into the meat of Project Veritas's claims of censorship. The way these accusations were released were through both hidden camera clips as well as with leaked documents by former Google/YouTube employee Zach Voorhees. Voorhees alleged that Google was attempting to skew the election, censor search results, and even mind control. But let's look at the legitimacy of the fired Google employee. After his rise to fame, he apparently started to censor his past self on Twitter, mass deleting anti-Semitic and conspiratorial tweets. Some of the recovered tweets reveal his claims that Christopher Columbus was a Jew, as well as claims that Jews did 9/11. On top of this, there is also significant evidence to suggest that he believes in other common conspiracies such as vaccines causing autism and Pizzagate. Regardless of what you believe to be the validity of these conspiracies, the fact he believes all of them and promotes them proves he is quickly convinced by small amounts of evidence. Again, does this prove the Project Veritas findings are bunk? No. But as before, it should cause us to be even more critical of this so-called evidence. The first batch of evidence O'Keefe released to prove his claims about big tech censorship included video footage captured by hidden cameras. However, reputed conservative think tank Cato Institute wrote, "Although the film's claims are misleading and its findings unconvincing, they are taken seriously by lawmakers who risk using such claims to justify needless legislation and regulation." Next, Cato Institute points out some major fallacies in O'Keefe's video evidence. One of the key problems with O'Keefe's video is that he creates a false dichotomy between pure user-created signals and machine learning inputs that have been curated to eliminate eventual output bias. The unnamed insider, who we already know is Zach Voorhees, claims that attempts to rectify algorithmic bias are equivalent to vandalism, because that source of truth has been vandalized. The output of the algorithm is also reflecting that vandalism. Despite the insider's claims that they would never admit this publicly, Google is quite open about its efforts to prevent algorithmic bias. The firm maintains a list of machine learning fairness resources, including an extensive glossary of terms describing different sorts of bias and sample code demonstrating how to train classifiers while avoiding bias. These public resources are, frankly, far more extensive and reveal more about Google's efforts to prevent machine learning bias than anything in the latest Veritas video. The truth is that complicated algorithmic data is used to make sure that Google search provides the most accurate data possible for the user, and amid those complications, there's a lot of room for misunderstanding. Google largely keeps these decisions quiet, which leaves room for speculation. Conservative technological giant Zach Grave calls for Google to be more transparent about their algorithms to avoid misunderstandings like this one happening in the future. On Google's part, given all of the tensions around bias lately, they would probably be wise to be more transparent about how their news algorithm works and do more proactive outreach to avoid future misunderstandings. In the Veritas video, not only did O'Keefe misrepresent much of Google's interactions, he also blatantly lied. The video claimed that Section 230 says that in order for them to be a platform, they can't censor the content that they have. Instead, they decided to act as a publisher, making them responsible for everything they put on, and they're still masquerading as a platform even though they're acting as a publisher. Cato Institute called out this falsehood. The actual provisions of Section 230 that O'Keefe butchered so terribly are: the first, prevents providers of an interactive computer service from being treated as the publisher or speaker of any information provided by another information content provider. The second provision allows content hosts to moderate content or restrict access to or availability of material that the provider or user considers to be obscene, lewd, filthy, excessively violent, harassing, or otherwise objectionable. The full statute explicitly provides for private moderation. It also makes no mention of a publisher-platform distinction. As far as the law is concerned, whether a website that hosts user-submitted content is a platform or a publisher simply does not matter. Obviously, O'Keefe is trying to misinform his audience. A lot of these misunderstandings stem from technical language which is very foreign to the average user. For example, Google Search is being conflated with Google News and treated the same despite using completely different algorithms. Outside links are what Google has used to determine authoritativeness and trustworthiness since the 1990s, which is completely based on the user's interaction with Google's content. Complex machine learning functions like RankBrain and an evolving set of algorithms with names like Hummingbird, Panda, Penguin, and Pigeon, which are what Google primarily relies upon currently, still are primarily based on the concept of incoming links. And these algorithms are pretty synonymous with other search engines like DuckDuckGo. From a practical level, it seems as though even if Google was deciding which sites to promote, there is still not much evidence of a political slant. With this in mind, it should be no great surprise that outlets like the New York Times, CNN, and Washington Post trounce outlets like PJ Media, National Review, and the Weekly Standard in organic search. The sites in the latter group don't have metrics that support them rising to the top of the search algorithm. Of course, PJ Media found Fox and Wall Street Journal weren't affected by this bias because their numbers are actually comparable to the former group of left-wing outlets. So if the hidden camera footage isn't considered reliable evidence, what about the 950 documents? Surely they must contain hard data to prove big tech is censoring conservatives. The first batch of evidence within these leaked documents included information about a Google blacklist. Sounds nefarious enough, and this quickly got people talking. However, this Google blacklist was for a since-failed Android application called Google Now, which typically promoted its own URLs. Its quote blacklist was mostly constituted of a lot of pirating and torrenting sites, as well as some unilaterally declaimed propaganda peddling sites such as the Daily Stormer with high user block rates when they did show up on Google Now. Rather than showing that Google was being biased against these sites, it literally only showed that these are the sites voluntarily blocked by the users. Other leaked documents, such as this one, show out-of-context screenshots, which apparently reveal Google's rating system. But even if you were to try and draw a political biased agenda out of this, it would be difficult. Far-left sites such as Huffington Post and the Young Turks are rated much lower than more right-leaning sites such as Fox News and Breitbart. Other documents included nothing but a one-way email from an employee to the CEO of Google arguing that Breitbart shouldn't be allowed to use AdSense. However, this never went anywhere, and Breitbart still receives AdSense. All in all, O'Keefe provided out-of-context screenshots along with other questionable claims and assertions. Cato Institute says that O'Keefe's video is just a whole lot of nothing. O'Keefe lives up to the standard that he set for himself being a muckraker. The attempt to prove Google is censoring conservatives was full of lies, deceptive editing, and documents taken greatly out of context. The only thing to be learned from this project allegedly exposing Google's bias is that even though both sides criticize Google for censoring, it is doing its best to ensure that you, the viewer, see the most authoritative, accurate, and relevant information. This is limited to Google though. What about other big tech companies like Twitter? Columbia University researcher and fellow conservative Richard Hania went through the laborious task of finding all of the public political influencers banned since 2006. The total was a whopping 22 people. 21 of these 22 people were Trump supporters. So there you go. Case closed. I suppose I've been proved wrong. Or have I? Because hold on a minute. This list of poor conservative martyrs includes American Nazi Party, David Duke, Alex Jones, Richard Spencer, And is that Richard Spencer's Radix Journal as well? Admittedly, white supremacist groups like American Renaissance, as well as its founder Jared Taylor, and National Policy Institute. The list also includes Tila Tequila, who expressed that people should be rounded up into literal camps, accompanied by her bio saying alt-right queen, literally Hitler. But let's keep going. Chuck Johnson said he wanted to take out a public figure, but I'm sure he was just banned for his pro-Trump and conservative narrative. It's not like any of these accounts were violating terms of service, right? Even more so, since when are any of these people considered conservative? The list also included accounts that were suspended and then reinstated, including the man himself, James O'Keefe. Looks like he's not the only one on this list. Candace Owens was reinstated with over 1 million followers, same with Azalea Banks. So that leaves us with a much smaller number, like less than 5. As I've said in the past, my Twitter account got suspended as well. I was a little offended I didn't make it on this list, I'm not gonna lie. But did I repeatedly use slurs and by doing so break the TOS? Yes. I'm not happy about it, but at least I'm honest. It wasn't for my conservative views that I was banned. This is yet another reason that this is correlation rather than causation. Conservatives like Jordan Peterson and Ben Shapiro play by the rules and thrive on social media. Project Veritas was the last leg we had to stand on, but even that has been proven by fellow conservatives to be misleading and dishonest. It's completely fine if you disagree with my opinion on this issue. What makes conservatism great is the fact we can freely think and discuss our ideas openly. So this is my final take on the issue of big tech conservative censorship. Thanks for watching, everyone. I'll see you all soon. Peace.